All right, we're back here at ats.io. I'm joined by Brian Blessing, the host of Sportsbook Radio Vegas Hockey Hotline. Brian, how's it going today, man?
All these years of just talking to you, and now it's a double-edged sword. I got to look at you,
I
but
know, right?
you got to look at me. So,
Well, you're a good-looking guy for your age there, Brian.
oh, Jeff, but wow, thanks. He plays the old guy card. Well done. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing well, man. And, we just watched the Tour Championship finish up. Usually we talk about golf here on the segments that you and I do on the podcast, but we're going to do some NFL Week 1 stuff here today. Take a look at that. And we talked about the Thursday night game, Houston and Kansas City, on Monday's edition of ATS.io radio. So I want to look more ahead to Sunday, Brian, and a game that's, very near and dear to your heart here as the Buffalo Bills get underway. They take on the New York Jets. Lowest total on the board here for this game of 39.5. Bills here, a 6.5 point favorite, depending on where you look. What do you think about that number here for week 1?
I think it gets to 7. It may come back off and go back and forth. I do think you might see a few 7s. The total, I get. These two teams, the Jets play the Bills tough. If you remember, this was the opener last year, Adam. The game was in the Meadowlands, and the Jets were up in the first half, and then the Bills' furious comeback won the game in the second half. The one thing I would say for the Thursday night game, let's watch and see, although there are going to be about 16,000 fans at Arrowhead. These are games with no fans. And I think the one thing we got to watch in all games, and we can dive into this game a little bit, but I think you got to watch. I think the third down conversion rate across the board for the visitors is going to be substantially better than it's been in the past because the fans won't be on their feet going nuts, and the Jumbotron will have the train whistle or whatever, but the fans aren't going to be there to go nuts about it. I think the visiting teams will be able to communicate better. Third down conversion should go up. Hence, I think we'll see more points. Specific to this game, that may not be the case. But the one underwriting thing I'm looking for, I've got to believe Josh Allen is absolutely sick and tired of being told he's the Achilles heel for this football team. The defense is a stud. They've been in like the top 3 the last 3 years. I think they've even gotten better and upgraded. Watch out for Tremaine Edmonds, the linebacker. The kid's still 21 years old. It's his 3rd year in the league. He's a stud. Trey White, I think, has a chance to be the defensive player of the year in the NFL. Just got a big contract. Diggs comes in. Zach Moss will help them in the goal line. No more Frank Gore to go with Singletary. But I think Allen comes out of the gate with a big game because I think he is just fed up hearing he's the guy that holds the Bills back. And I think his progression, he went a little haywire and squirrely in the playoff game. But the plays he can make with his feet, I believe in this kid, Adam. I really do. But I think specific to this one game, I think he comes out of the gate and makes a statement.
So it sounds like you kind of have a lean towards the Bills here, -6, -6.5, or are you looking more maybe a first half type of wager on them?
Generally speaking, a lot of times I would do that, and I think the Bills should be, if it's 6.5, they're probably going to be a 3.5 point first half favorite. I would probably look in that direction because the one thing too, the Jets, they lost some serious people on defense, and I think they're still very much a work in progress. But they're familiar with one another. They're division foes, and yeah, I think the backdoor cover could certainly be in play.
Speaking of the AFC East here, and speaking of teams that have lost things, the New England Patriots, they're a 6.5 point favorite. First game on the board by rotation number on Sunday, taking on the Miami Dolphins with Cam Newton. And the Dolphins kind of became a little bit of a darling at the tail end of last year, played very well, covered some numbers, looked a lot better than they had early on in the year. You give credit to Brian Flores for kind of getting rid of some of the guys that didn't really buy in a whole lot with the Dolphins. What do you think about this number here with a Patriots team that, it's still Bill Belichick, even though it's Cam Newton instead of Tom Brady, and they lost some pieces on defense too. You think they can cover a number like this here in week 1?
It's a weird one, bud. And I think we're going to be watching the Bucs too and see the transition for them with Brady going in there. Belichick, I'm sure, would love to be this mad scientist and look what I did without Brady. But I think the jury's a little bit out. I mean, the Patriots, really have had trouble running the ball. Last year, Sony Michel, they couldn't do anything. Now you got Cam Newton in there. Miami, is this a fair statement? Would you agree with this from last year? The first month, the numbers, watching them play, you're thinking these guys could be historically bad. And they played their lungs out, and they played hard. Tua is going to get in here at some point. But Ryan Fitzpatrick, who drives me nuts, is a former Bills quarterback.
He's also from Harvard. Did you know that? I feel like no one ever talks about that.
If he's so smart, why does he throw it to the wrong color jersey?
No, that's a good question.
No, but he can win football games. I mean, he'll mess up games he should win. I kind of like Miami. I think, and it wouldn't shock me if Miami walked in there and won the football game.
No, I don't think that would shock too many people, especially with, sort of the perception of the Patriots and how much people expect them to be down. And, also too, I mean, we keep hearing all the talk about how, the Patriots are going to find a way to luck into Trevor Lawrence or something crazy like that. Who knows? We'll see what happens here, but an interesting week 1 game for a variety of different reasons. And you mentioned it already, so we might as well go ahead and talk about it here. The Buccaneers, so much hype. The hype train off the rails here this summer with Tampa Bay, with Tom Brady, all the weapons that Tom Brady has. They're taking on a very good New Orleans Saints team here, though, in week 1. Drew Brees making some headlines, for the wrong reasons here recently. Maybe a little bit of a, not perception bias, but maybe just kind of a bias with people hoping that Brady and the Bucs wind up taking down the Saints and Brees. What do you think about that game here where you've got New Orleans sitting there as a 3.5-point favorite right now?
I want to see what the Bucs are. And we haven't seen it. I think eventually they're going to do good things. But again, you mentioned the Breeze thing, and that's a whole another kettle of fish. But clearly he'll want to come out of the gate good. But if you're Sean Payton, if you're Drew Brees, and you're sitting there going, Tom Brady this, Tom Brady that, they're the established war horse that year after year after year keeps coming back, taking a kick at it. And this is Breeze's swan song. I don't know. I just think if I'm the Saints, I'm sick of hearing about it. And I can see I like the Saints.
So we talked about a handful of games here, and I guess just to sort of wrap up this short clip, and we will have another one here with you sort of talking more about the season in general. What's your favorite play for week 1? What do you kind of have your eye on as far as a side or a total?
It's a good question. I really, Bud, want to watch Thursday night and see how these games go. Right now, I would probably be inclined to say I like the over in the Seattle-Atlanta game.
I guess let me interrupt for a second and ask you this then, because we kind of talked about this a little bit on Monday's edition of ATS.io radio, talking about college football and about entering the market early in the week with so much uncertainty. So it sounds to me like maybe you're going to wait until later in the week to make your NFL plays.
Yeah, well, generally speaking, I think you're smart to bet early in the week because I always say this, it's as much who you bet as when you bet them. I mean, over the long haul, you want to get the best of the number. But I sincerely believe there are unknowns. And usually the adjustments, Adam, are in the NFL. College goes maybe week 3. Odds makers know what they're dealing with. Market knows what it's about. The NFL, it's week 1 to week 2, usually a handful of teams into week 3. I honestly believe that I think the adjustments in knowing what we're dealing with here with specific teams bleeds out a month because there's been no preseason. And all this, the stuff we say all the time, you don't want to be 0-2. 87% of the time you miss the playoffs. I think there will be teams that start 0-2 because they didn't have preseason games and their routine was altered. But then they get their act together. And just when you think they're bad, they click and go. So I think the adjustments are going to bleed out further this year than most. I want to see how it plays out with no fans. So I think in-play wagering, halftime wagering, things of that ilk make sense to me. In terms of a game this week, the total came down. I'm not on board with this one. It's Seattle with Wilson running around like a lunatic himself making plays, and he does that all the time. And Ryan's way better at home on the fast track at home. It just seems, before the intensity and the pressure of a season builds up, I can see these two offenses going up and down the field. That would probably be the one. The total came down, I believe, to 49. And I think that game, I think we see points in that game.
Well, and that was one of the big questions that we sort of had on Monday's podcast, sort of looking at, does the fact that there was no preseason, does that help the offense more? Does it hurt the offense? Does it help the defense? That's kind of a big question here going into week one, because as you said, no preseason. These guys really haven't been hitting each other all that much. No quarterbacks have really been hit. So you sort of wonder here what the gameplay looks like in week one, and if that lends itself more to maybe some overs with some shoddy tackling, or maybe some unders with some offenses that aren't really timed up yet.
It is. I mean, there's so many unknowns. In fact, the other game I consider, although the number, laying 8's a nightmare, generally. I guess you could tease it down, but the other one I would look at, and I would maybe pick your brain because it's in your backyard. Tell me what you're hearing about the Browns, because the one thing I would say to you is that the Ravens' MO is Harbaugh has these guys ready to go. They win all their preseason games, and they put the Sasquatch foot on people in the opener. Look at them the last 3 of the last 4 years. They've boat raced people in the opener. Is Cleveland done reading their press clippings? Is there a, more discipline, a sense of purpose? But just historically, I'd say, I think we have to have your plays and your picks. I trust Wilson to run around and Ryan's good at home. The other thing I think you should look at with your handicapping are coaches. And I trust Harbaugh to be a guy that dealt with this adverse circumstance better than others, because he's always good about getting them to come out of the gate. But I'm trusting him. I don't know what I'm getting out of Cleveland.
No, that's an excellent question. I mean, I think Baltimore and Indianapolis are perfect for one of those long teasers going through 3 and 7. Take Baltimore down to 2, take Indianapolis down to 2 as well. I think that's probably the approach that I would take. But the Browns, it's tough. One day you hear one thing, you hear they look great. The next day you hear that they really struggled in training camp. Baker Mayfield, saying all the right things as he did coming into his rookie year. Didn't really do that so much last year. Tons of skill position talent. Lots of talent on the defensive side of the ball. Stefanski is clearly an upgrade over Kitchens, but does it all come together here in week one where they're taking on the team that most people would say is probably 1B to Kansas City's 1A in the AFC? So I agree with you. I think it's a tough spot to expect Cleveland to, be at peak performance, and maybe Harbaugh's a guy you trust a little bit more.
Let me throw one more knuckleball in here. I know you want to wrap up. This is such a unique set of circumstances, Bud. Is this in the realm of possibility? I think it is. Say the Ravens have 17-point lead at the beginning of the fourth quarter. These guys have really not been hitting each other. No one's in game shape. They can't be, right? They've had no tune-up. Are the backdoor covers in play a lot of places? Because if someone's got a big lead, we feel pretty good about this. Let's get some depth guys in there and bring starters out, because it's a marathon, not a sprint. And we feel comfortable with the lead. Let's not expose them to injury, and they're getting tired. We'll bring some backups in. We think we'll be okay, and be okay to win the game. But it may cost you a bet on the back end with the backdoor cover.
No, that's an excellent question, especially too when you think about the fact that you're going to need those guys at some point. Injuries are going to happen, and they didn't get their preseason reps. That second-team offensive line probably plays, 60% of the snaps in the preseason, and they have none of that here this year. I think it's an excellent point that you make that, maybe teams that do have a lead will kind of put it in cruise control a little bit and empty the bench, so to speak, to give those guys a chance to play.
There's so much more. I mean, we could go on and on and on. We could probably do 5 more videos about the uncertainties. But look at the way rosters were constructed. A lot of teams are carrying 3 quarterbacks, where really you're only carrying 2. But they're carrying 3 on the active roster because, God forbid, one of the quarterbacks tests positive down the road. You can't be left in a lurch. So even the way the rosters have been constructed has been tampered with.
Most definitely. Keep it locked in right here at ats.io. We got a lot of YouTube video content coming for you. We got podcast content and, of course, great written stuff over at the ats.io website as well. I'm Adam Burke. He's Brian Blessing of Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Outline. Hope you enjoyed this video, and we got plenty more coming for you here for this 2020 NFL season.